This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast is brought to you by seed breeder KWS.
I'm a big fan of whiskey. We export a lot of whiskey. If we could export as much of our homegrown food as we export that fantastic whiskey drink to other nations, I'd be a happy person.
What will new Defra Secretary Angela Eagle mean for UK farming? Farmers at the Royal Welsh Show give their verdict on the agricultural budget for Wales, with a tribute to livestock leader and farmer David Barton, and the latest on harvest and the future for sugar beet. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johan Tasker.
I'm Abby Kay.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Straight to our top story. Dame Angela Eagle has been appointed Defra Secretary, returning to the department she left just a month ago when she was Minister for Farming and Food Security. The move gives Dame Angela a key role in Andy Burnham's first cabinet, where she'll take responsibility for the Prime Minister's policies for agriculture and the environment. So, as the Eagle returns home to roost, what can we expect this time around? Was too early to say, of course, but maybe there's a clue in an interview we did with Dame Angela when she was Farm Minister earlier this year. Here she is talking about her goals to the Farmers Weekly podcast at NFU conference in February.
I'd like to simplify our schemes. I'd like to have the land use framework out there so people have much more of an idea about how we can use land in a multi-purpose way, in a more effective and efficient way. I want our farming to be sustainable both socially and environmentally. I want us to be growing a bit more of our own food. And I'm a big fan of whiskey. We export a lot of whiskey. If we could export as much of our homegrown food as we export that fantastic whiskey drink to other nations, I'd be a happy person.
That's Dame Angela Eagle speaking to us here on the Farmers Weekly podcast as Farm Minister earlier this year. Her goals partly achieved: a simplified sustainable farming incentive and the land use framework. Food exports and whiskey, though, unfinished business. So, Abby, Hugh, I don't think we could have hoped for much more as an industry from this new cabinet. Angela Eagle back at Defra after only a short time away, so some continuity there, succeeding Emma Reynolds, who's now Chief Secretary to the Treasury. So at last, someone at the Treasury who understands farming. Angela Eagle, though, as Defra Secretary. Abby, your thoughts?
I guess it depends what you think a Defra Secretary's job is, right? She's also got Treasury experience that will come in useful when it comes to negotiating budgets and whatnot. But she's not a natural champion of farming like some of her predecessors with an ag background of being kind of saw it as their job to defend farmers and farming. She definitely doesn't come from that stable, but she's a safe pair of hands appointment. So she knows the department after a recent stint there, as you say, but she's not in Burnham's inner circle. And that will matter when it comes to influence, even though she's quite a senior figure in the party, isn't she? She joined the Commons in 1992, but she's not in that inner circle. And we know from Burnham's history that he likes to keep a tight circle and that the people in it share a similar outlook and vision. And Eagle's an appointment that demonstrates his strategy in trying to design a cabinet that draws on different Labour traditions, but she might not necessarily have his ear in the way that someone like Louise Hay does, for example.
Hugh, your thoughts on Angela Eagle?
I think when she was doing the farming, food security farming minister role under the Starmer administration, when you spoke to people that were involved with her, they said that she's a very capable individual and she knew the brief. She was across the brief. And I get what Abby's saying about, we've had previous people being minister who are farming champions, some who are farmers themselves or from farming backgrounds. And actually, sometimes they're probably some of the worst people you can have in the role, because whilst they understand the industry, they're probably not objective enough and they probably don't look at it harshly enough. And there's still a lot of stuff to be done. I think as someone that's going to look at it objectively in terms of the whole brief, and there's a lot to be done, whether it's around farming, water quality, air quality, all of the stuff that's just rumbling on and on and on, emissions, etc. Having someone with a sort of incisive mind that can swallow a huge brief and a lot of information and come to some conclusions is going to be key here. And then the other thing, I suppose, that, we can change all the guard we like. Geez, you could change the political party again. And we've been saying this for 5, 6, 7 years. The last lot were just as bad. We've got a 50 or a 200-year farming plan or whatever the heck it is, but we still don't have solid budgets, solid numbers. So, it's back to, are we ever going to be in a situation like we were pre-Brexit, where the cap cycle was 6 to 8 year cycle? You knew where you were at least for 5 or 6 years of those, with 3 to 4 years of rumblings going into the renegotiation and the resettlement. When are we ever going to get to a point where a government, whatever colour they are, can say, right, this is the plan. It is a 5-year plan. We are sticking to it. This is the budget. This is what will be available. This is what you can get. Because for all of the plans and all of the aspirations, that is still hugely missing at every level.
Abby, the other interesting reshuffle appointment is the appointment of Suffolk MP Jenny Riddle-Carpenter to a junior post at Defra. Jenny Riddle-Carpenter, of course, heading up the Labour Rural Research Group of MPs, which was, I guess you could argue, instrumental in getting the government's inheritance tax proposals watered down, but also published this recent report into boosting the rural economy, which has been backed by the Country Landowners Association.
Yeah, she's probably the most farmer-friendly appointment, if you want to put that in inverted commas. She's done a lot of legwork on rural issues. She was also a member of the EFRA committee. She represents Suffolk Coastal. And I was having a kind of look at Hansard to see what kind of things she'd said about farming to get a sense for her views. And I found that in a debate last year, she accused the largest supermarkets of acting in effect like a cartel. And she contrasted supermarket profits with rising farm costs. That is quite significant. It goes way beyond what Defra ministers usually say about kind of improving relationships in the supply chain. And it seems to suggest she might believe government needs to kind of act against concentrated buyer power rather than just improve voluntary codes, which is what we've had talk of for years and years and years. So she would kind of be the most natural fit for the farming brief. And if she does get that, we still don't know the division of responsibilities in the team at the time we're recording. But if she does get that, that will definitely be something to watch. Whether that gets beaten out of her, we'll have to wait and see.
Now, that Labour Rural Research Group report, which calls for policies that harness the potential of the rural economy, chimes with Andy Burnham's pledge to reindustrialise every corner of the UK. But what does that mean for the countryside, especially at a time when our farming sector is struggling? This week saw British Sugar announce the closure of its Cantley sugar processing factory in Norfolk, a blow to eastern region sugar beet growers. So are things, in fact, going backwards? Earlier, Hugh and I caught up with Norfolk farmer and NFU Sugar Board chairman Kit Papworth.
It's a blow, particularly as that factory's just had a huge amount of money spent on it. And growers really felt that they'd got a future growing into that factory. But sadly, since 2017, factories across Europe have been closing, and this is just the next in that line.
British Sugar is saying that this is about efficiency. It will help the processor maintain its competitive position within the sector. Do you go along with that?
Look, we're at the bottom of a price cycle at the moment. I see that British Sugar think that they can process the area through their remaining factories, but they need to pay a competitive price to do that. And beet growers have other choices, and they can grow other things. And so, what this does is make more growers more than 60 miles from a factory. And so, we're calling on British Sugar to make sure that commitment that they've given for 1 year is extended so that beet growers in the east of the country aren't disadvantaged by this decision in the long term.
And they do say that you won't be disadvantaged. Presumably, they're gonna pay you more for transport to take your crop to Wissington or Bury St Edmunds or wherever they decide.
Only for the 27-28 year, Johan. This is only a commitment for that year, and those growers need certainty. They've supported the factory for over 100 years, and this we need a long-term commitment so people can commit to the beet industry. Obviously, a lot of the equipment that you use in sugar beet is specialist, and harvesting, hauling, haulage and seed drills, those kind of things. Growers need certainty, and this is certainly not providing it.
If closing Cantley means your beet price moves in a more positive direction to where you want it to be, is that a price that you think growers are willing to take?
I don't think closing Cantley has a positive effect on price. What it does is put pressure on growers further east. I accept that British Sugar have lost money. That's not growers' fault. That is the world market and also the way that they sell sugar. But the truth is that British Sugar want around 80 to 90,000 hectares of sugar beet, and a wider geographic footprint would have helped them to achieve that, whereas now they're going to be relying on 3 factories and a greater distance to haul those beet. And I think some of those areas they're going to struggle to get those beet into. So longer term, I think this is not good news for the industry, and really we need commitment that they're not going to bring in sugar from other countries to replace the volume if they have increased demand. And I think we need to ensure that those growers who are disadvantaged are compensated in the long term.
And just give us a feel for the haulage factor here, because some people will be listening to this that know nothing about sugar beet, that are farming, and they think, well, we send cattle miles in a wagon to a factory on the other side of the country. It's different for sugar, presumably a bit like potatoes, because the volume's coming off each hectare.
It's different to every crop, actually, because British Sugar pay to deliver the beet, but only up to 60 miles. And so the closure of Cantley factory means that there are growers in Norfolk who are over 60 miles from their closest factory now, and British Sugar are agreeing to cover that additional cost for 1 year. But that 1 year is only okay now. In 3 or 4 years' time, those growers, this area is one of the highest yielding growers, and I'm one of them affected by this. That haulage is we're going to have to start funding that ourselves, and it's not going to be reflected in the price, sadly. So that's the problem with this. And also, is there actually the haulage available? Are there the lorries available in East Norfolk to bring those beet to Wissington and to Bury St Edmunds?
That's Norfolk sugar beet grower and NFU Sugar Board Chairman Kit Papworth. And just to re-emphasise British Sugar, saying that sugar beet growers that supply Cantley will not be out of pocket, at least for the first year, following the planned closure of the Cantley factory from February next year. Hugh, at the closure of the Cantley sugar beet factory, food processing in this country, we know, under huge amounts of pressure at the moment, not just sugar beet, but red meat processing as well. And yet food processing as a whole, a big part of the rural economy that Andy Burnham and his new Labour government want to revitalise.
Look, we know it is. The whole supply chain is key to. They're all cogs in a system, aren't they? And if one drops out, it has an impact. I think there's 2 ways of looking at it, isn't there? One, if you can reduce the amount of factories you've got and make them more efficient, so you could potentially pay more back to producers, and you've got more headroom in terms of running your business, then you've got to look at it from that perspective. Equally, the other way of looking at it is that any erosion into agricultural infrastructure, in this case in Norfolk, is going to have an impact. Whilst you gain some efficiencies, you're going to end up hauling stuff further. But as someone that comes from a part of the country where we have very little, we've got small abattoirs on life support down here south of the Thames in the southeast corner. We've got very limited grain processing. Livestock markets are. We haven't had a local livestock market here where I am in Surrey since Guildford Market shut August 2000. That's how long we've survived without a livestock market. So you can adapt, but any change of infrastructure and any degradation of that agricultural infrastructure and processing is always something that is not welcome and needs to be really hard in terms of, it needs to be questioned hugely.
And both the red meat sector and sugar very much playing in a global market, and imports coming into the country often proving challenging for both those sectors.
Yeah, I think if you look at the sugar scenario, obviously, British Sugar, I think it's nearly 50% of the sugar that we eat in the UK, isn't it? Comes from sugar beet, and the other comes as imported cane product. Obviously, there's also some competition of other sweeteners and other derivatives from corn syrup and stuff like that. But when you look at it, it's a really key part of the UK sugar matrix, as it were. But equally, it is massively under pressure from imported product. And actually, if you look at the imported product, they've got their challenges as well. When they're growing sugar cane, they've got environmental challenges, climate challenges, and all that stuff going on. But one thing that always strikes me is it's you've got a sort of perennial bush that grows back every year or every 2 years, and it just sits there fairly stable. Whereas you've got this other product, which you have to, it's like potatoes, you've got to rip the heck out of everything to get it in the ground, and then rip the heck out of everything to get it out the ground. And you sort of look at the two in terms of efficiency, although the yields are comparable. So undoubtedly there are huge challenges there. On the red meat side, again, this is something that's been going on slowly but surely, isn't it? We've seen a slow decline in terms of red meat consumption in the UK, and that's a 30-year trend. Although if you look at year on year, sales are still, despite declining, they're still doing okay. We've got a lamb sector which is on fire at the moment because of a really good export trade. We've got a beef sector which just, it clubs along. The prices are lifting again now because cattle are getting short again. But there's not really much of a plan. And it's not surprising. Many of these red meat plants have been running on 4-day weeks for a long time anyway, because if you look at the kill numbers, they're lower than they have been for a long, long time. And currently that trajectory is going down. And it comes back to probably a lack of a plan. If you look at there's not much stuff. I mean, the NFU've got their roadmap, which is really good in terms of their vision for the beef industry. But what that says is that we need, external investment, and the NBA would say the same as well. We need to really kick on with exports. And at the moment, you've got a beef sector which is ticking along, quite happily supplying all the big retailers, making a bit of a margin. Everything's hunky-dory. Tell the retailers what they want in terms of what's going on farm, and it chonks along. There is no mass growth or no real push to grow export trade, which I think is a huge own goal there at the moment, given the state of the global beef market and demand profile. If you look at the US, look at other parts of the world, there's a huge demand for beef. And even with the climate challenges we've got going on at the moment, which we know those of us in a drought are many, we still can knock it out the park compared to other parts of the world. So it's a pretty thing. HDB recently launched their farming roadmap, or their sort of roadmap for beef and lamb. And you look at that, and even that's not very ambitious compared to our competitors. I think they, we're going to get a 7.24 cut in emissions by 2050. Whoopee-doo. Most of our competitors are on 20% plus. Okay, some have changed even the ones that halved their original 40-odd% targets for 2050. I think Australia were up at like 48%. They've halved it back. It's still 24%. And our number's 7.42 or something. So it just needs a bit more ambition and kick it on, which goes back to the whole thing, doesn't it, of the rural powerhouse. You need ambition, you need a plan, and you need to get on and kick it on and wave the stick a bit.
Abby, the rural powerhouse, this phrase beloved of the Country, Land and Business Association, a fantastic ambition, but it's hard, isn't it, to revitalise the rural economy when you're effectively deindustrialising rather than reindustrialising. Factories are closing, partly in the case of the Cantley sugar beet factory, because of these imports of raw cane sugar coming into the country.
Yeah, and I think there's just a real contradiction in the signals that are being sent here. So obviously last year we had the government increase that cane sugar import quota by 25% actually, so quite a significant increase. And that took effect in January this year. And at the time they said, the market needs more imported raw sugar for refining. Now I checked the latest figures this morning, and around 46% of that quota has been used so far this year. But Brazilian exports don't tend to come in really until around October time, or from now until October, so that will increase quite quickly. But then British Sugar says Cantley is closing in part because of declining sugar volumes, just 7 months after the quota increase. So it just feels like there's quite an obvious question here, which is how do those two things fit together? If the market needs more imported cane sugar, why doesn't it need 4 beet factories? Because once processing capacity is lost, it's really difficult to get back.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
The Farmers Weekly Harvest Update, brought to you by KWS.
Welcome to our latest Farmers Weekly Harvest Update, and I'm joined again by Matt Bull from KWS. Matt, welcome along. It doesn't seem like a week ago when we were speaking about barley. Some more combines this week rolling into oilseed rape, and indeed wheat not very far away at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me again. And I think similar story to what we saw with winter barleys. The initial oilseed rape yields don't seem too bad, largely being reported with between 2.5 to 3.5 tonne. And to be honest, when we're looking at the price of oilseed rape at the moment, most of those crops should be turning a decent profit. So good commercial prospects with the oilseed rape once again, and we continue to expect a bigger area in the ground for harvest 2027. In terms of the wheat harvest, we know that wheat was planted over a really long window from autumn 25 through to early new year in 2026. So we had quite variable crops in the ground, and those crops on the lightest land typically are the ones which have come off first. The harvest looks okay at the moment, like what we saw with winter barley. Straw yields are back, and generally the grain quality is slightly back, but ultimately the yields are looking okay so far.
You're talking about the commercial prospects for crops like oilseed rape. Wheat margins, of course, are tight this year. Varieties and risk management are going to be key when it comes to both those crops.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the key conversations we've been having over the last couple of months at demo days and such has been around marketing flexibility with different varieties. So your typical Group 4 growers are looking at how they can find a variety which offers them the opportunity for a small premium, and people are looking more into the Group 2s and Group 3s than we've seen before.
And flexibility between wheat groups and indeed end markets is important as ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And making sure that you're selecting the right variety for the right position on farm is absolutely critical and gives us the opportunity to get the best out of the varieties to maximise their commercial value. Now, in terms of marketing flexibility, the beauty of the Group 3 market is that not only can they go for biscuit wheat production, but they can also go for distilling, into feed homes, and of course, the export market as well. And I think KWS Solitaire is a variety which fits all of those end market requirements and is arguably the most marketable variety on the recommended list today. It's got feed level yields with good agronomics and should be a strong consideration for planting autumn 2026. We also have KWS Arnie in the Group 2 market segment. It's the highest yielding Group 2 variety on the recommended list, but ultimately that's delivering feed level yields with the opportunity for a small premium where the local end market requires it.
Matt, thank you as always. KWS Arnie then and KWS Solitaire. Some interesting insight and some interesting ideas as harvest continues, and I guess thoughts turning very much to autumn drilling. That's it for this week's Farmers Weekly Harvest Update with KWS. Happy harvesting, and do join us again next time when we'll have another update with Matt Bull from KWS.
That's the Farmers Weekly Harvest Update, brought to you by KWS, seeding the future since 1856.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Now, farm leaders say the announcement of a ring-fenced multi-annual funding settlement for the Sustainable Farming Scheme in Wales is a major boost. Funding worth £340 million per annum was announced on the first day of the Royal Welsh Show, fulfilling a promise made by the Plaid Cymru government. Plaid leads the Welsh Government for the first time following the May 2026 Senedd elections almost 100 days ago. Welsh Farm Union President Abby Reader of NFU Cymru said the money would provide much needed stability and certainty during a time of extreme volatility for farmers. Well, Farmers Weekly reporter Anne Dunn asked farmers at the Royal Welsh Showground whether they agreed. This is what they said.
I mean, that's a little bit of stability, isn't it? For farming as a business, it's a bit of stability. That's what we want. But again, we need to be looking longer term than just 12 months, don't we? Like we need to be looking a little bit further than that. It's good that they have guaranteed that, but yeah, to me, it's not quite enough yet to develop my business and to be enthusiastic about the business. I think that's what we need, is a little bit more security for 3 to 5 years at least.
Slow, in my opinion. I know it's only 100 days, but I think for me, particularly in the arable sector, we need some clarification on SFS. We need to see how the optional layers are going to work, because I feel that really that's where our sector in particular can probably help with the government and what they want to achieve and the targets that are there. Just give us the tools to do the job, basically.
Certainly they were quite vocal when they were in opposition, quite supportive of agriculture, and that seems to have translated into the policy we're hearing so far. I guess my own gut feeling is that Plaid Cymru have listened to farmers and was certainly easier to engage with them than maybe some of their predecessors. It's can they deliver, really? That'll be the big question. But yeah, certainly quite confident that they're going to give it a go anyway.
Some farmer voices from the Royal Welsh Show. Also at the Royal Welsh this year, Farmers Weekly reporter Anne Dunn. And earlier I caught up with Anne and I asked her what the atmosphere was like on the showground.
The mood on the showground is positive, which is a real change from what we have seen over the last couple of years when farmers were quite frankly pretty angry with the Welsh Government. Of course, now we have got a Plaid Cymru government. They've not done 100 days in office yet, but they have delivered on some of their key manifesto pledges. One of those big promises was to provide multi-year funding for the industry. So they have announced that £1 billion for the sector until the end of the Senedd term. That translates into £340 million a year. That money is ring-fenced, and that also provides clarity for the sustainable farming scheme. For that universal layer, which makes up 70% of the budget. So farmers are happy with that. They acknowledge it's a pay cut because the money is not going up in line with inflation. Farming unions have previously said to really hit the ground running and to enable the sector to do everything that they want to be doing, they need 500 million, they're getting 340 million. But despite that, the mood is positive.
Not the total amount of money then that they wanted from the Welsh Government, Anne, but at least they know where they stand. There is some certainty.
They have got that certainty. What they're arguing for now and what they're saying is actually, okay, if you are not going to pay us any more money, we understand the economic pressures that there are. Let's make it easier to fulfill those universal actions that we have to complete to get paid under the sustainable farming scheme. The Welsh Government have been making positive noises about that as well, sort of say, you tell us what the problems are, we will work with you on that. Industry already has had one result, part of the Universal Action 12, which looks at animal health and welfare. They have announced that from next year, from 2027, if you are farm assured, those farmers who are farm assured are not going to have to also do the animal health improvement cycle. So that, again, it cuts down on paperwork, it reduces that red tape, and depending on where you got your quote from your vet to come out and do that, you could be saving something in the region of £500 as well.
As Farmers Weekly reporter Anne Dunn at the Royal Welsh Show. Hugh, some positivity there in Wales at the moment. A new government and some certainty when it comes to farm payments and the sustainable farming scheme.
Yeah, hey, they got lucky. They got like a universal scheme. Count yourself lucky, Wales, because we ain't in England. There is a universal allowance there. I think it's 70% of the funding they're saying goes on the universal, 30% on the optional, the bolt-ons, if you will. I think, look, it's great to see that happening for colleagues in Wales, because if we go back a year or two to when the Labour administration were in charge there, the door was very firmly shut. If you go back 2 or 3 years, they were wanting to do lots of tree planting, lots of this, lots of that. Clearly, there's a big sort of worry, as it were, about regulation and red tape, and that needs to be streamlined. But I think, I think they're in a much better position, aren't they? And look, Plaid are the party of Wales. Their origins come from rural Wales. So you would like to think that they're not going to hang the Welsh rural community out to dry, whereas some might have said the previous Labour administration, quite frankly, were just focused on the southern valleys, and that was it, which was their political heartland.
You talk about red tape, Hugh. Abby, there was this tabletop display, this stark display by NFU Cymru, 4,000 sheets of A4 paper on this table representing the sheer amount of bureaucracy that Welsh farmers have to deal with simply to farm, as it were. NFU Cymru really, really good at highlighting farming challenges in a very visual way. This tabletop display, this big wad of paper. Not so long ago, they had a similar but different display. Lots of Wellington boots outside the Senedd building in Cardiff, representing the number of farmers being forced to quit, as they see it, the industry.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because we live in a world where we're bombarded with words and information all the time. And sometimes to have that kind of visual display, it really helps to drive the message home in a way that doesn't with your kind of traditional campaign materials. They did the welly boots outside the Senedd, didn't they? And this time it's this visual impression of how big of a problem regulation is for farmers. And yeah, big ups to NFU Cymru. They are really good at doing that. And I think it's really effective, more so for the general public as well. If you're a member of the public who's at the Royal Welsh and you walk past the stand and you see that, you instantly want to ask the question, well, what's that for? And how is it represented? So yeah, I think it's really effective.
Look, I think you've got to be grown up about this. Yes, you need to make red tape smart and you need to make it easy to comply with. But equally, particularly where you're involving public funds, you've got to be accountable. The idea that it really used to wind me up in the good old days. Do you remember when we had the BPS, when you sit down by May the 15th and tick all your boxes and do all the stuff you had to do to get your single farm payment? It used to really wind me up when farmers would whinge about filling in paperwork. And for some of them, I'd say, mate, for that one day you're filling it in, you're on more money than your average Premiership footballer on a day rate based on what you're claiming annually. So just find the balance. I think you always got to call into question, is this red tape needed? Why are you making us do this? Why are we being licensed? Why are we being permitted? Absolutely. But equally, you've got to be accountable in terms of, okay, so I'm taking this public money and I'm delivering X. And the idea that you can just drift in, take it and drift away, no questions answered, it's like people turning up to do a job for you and not doing the job, but they still want paying. So you need some accountability. And actually, there are a lot of challenges there. Let's not beat about the bush here. There are certain environmental challenges that all of us have got to address, whether that's around air quality, water quality, soil health, all of that stuff. Okay, I know it irritates the hell out of some people, but there are some issues there. Clearly, there are issues where we're having more of the book thrown at us than probably we should be. And again, having that evidence base and having that regulatory framework that works with farmers, which delivers KPIs into their business and demonstrates, my God, what a great job we are doing. Go away, leave me alone for another 10 years with your permitting book and all that nonsense. Then that is where you do need regulation. So it's finding a balance, isn't it? But I think just grumping on and saying, oh, it's terrible, I've got all this paperwork, I want to farm. Mate, that's life. Get on with it. Everyone else in every other sector, because of the litigious nature of society today and all that goes on and all the accountability that everyone wants and the transparency that customers want, it's there. Okay, it's a fact of life. So learn to cope with it. And hopefully we can all work together to develop systems which are smart, quick and easy. And it delivers at every level. It delivers for the farmer, it delivers for the regulator and the government, and it delivers for the consumer.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly Podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can message us by texting the word farm, followed by a message to 88440. Hugh, some sad news this week.
Yeah, some really terrible, really sad news. David Barton, who's the NFU's National Livestock Board chair, suddenly died on his farm at the end of last week. And it's just one of those shocking things. I'd only spoke to him on the phone a day before. And then it emerged on the Thursday that, he sadly passed away, died suddenly on his farm. So really sad news. And you couldn't, it's always, it's always the good ones that go first, isn't it? As the saying goes. He had quite a position of responsibility and he's a real champion for everything to do with all the stuff the livestock board deals with. So that's sheep and cattle and lowland and upland and all of that stuff that he spent tireless hours representing members' interests on, and he had time for everyone, and he was a real champion of the red meat sector, I suppose, and put so much time and effort into it.
A farmer dedicated to livestock, Hugh, and David represented farmers for a good number of years.
Yeah, he had. I mean, I'd known him for over 10 years, and when I first met him, he was doing some amazing work. It was at the time when the TB battle was sort of focused on the sort of wildlife control element, and he was one of those sort of pioneer farmers that was trying to sort of get involved there and did a heck of a lot of work representing the farming interest, particularly in the public eye. You know, he was on the news loads talking about the impact TB had on his herd of suckler cows in the Cotswolds and, you know, how they needed to get on top of it. And he was a tireless campaigner in that respect. And I suppose that's how he got sort of involved, if you will, sort of sucked into the sort of world of farm politics. And then he was the sort of TB advisory group rep on the livestock board for many years. That's when I first knew him. And then became the vice chair, and then more latterly the chair. He was elected into his second term as chair back in March. And like I say, you couldn't ask for a nicer bloke, and you know, he's a real champion of the industry, and not just here. He spent a lot, you know, in that role. You go all over the world representing the interests of the UK, be that on a political lobbying sense, or be that on a sort of sales piece with HDB trying to promote exports, and he was there all the time doing that. So a huge loss, a real shock to everyone that worked with him, and someone that we shall fondly remember. And yeah, just really shocking that someone, he's only 58, just suddenly goes so suddenly. But yeah, a real loss, and someone that we'll all fondly remember for one, being such a nice bloke, but also for all the tireless work he did on behalf of colleagues across the UK.
And our thoughts are, of course, with David's family. Now, it has been another hot week, harvest continuing across the country. Some people have even finished. It's been that early. Hugh, you've been up north this week. What's it been like there?
Yeah, I was up in the north this week, and I was actually shocked. I was in East Yorkshire, and I was really shocked at how, I know it's dry everywhere, not everywhere actually, because the northwest corner, Cumbria, up into southwest Scotland, they've had more moisture. It's greener than the rest of the country, but I was really shocked how dry it was around East Yorkshire, down the M62, and then going back up towards York. I'd say it's actually in places drier than it is here. We thought it was dry down in the southeast. The maize looks more stressed up there, so that's really bad for everyone up there. And then cattle on dust bowls everywhere at the moment, but it just seemed to be particularly bad there. One weird thing was I actually broke down. I had a bit of a blowout, and I had to pull off the A1, and I was just up near Wentbridge, and I was on the edge of a wheat field. And the weird thing was I walked into the wheat field, just being a nosy farmer, and took a sample of what was there. But what surprised me is that wheat it was actually quite a nice bold sample despite the dryness. And actually it wasn't that fit. It was probably a little way off being cut. So there's still a bit of softness to it. But yeah, very, very dry indeed. Other thing that's happened this week, which I had forgotten all about these happen, one of the young chaps that helps me at the weekends had to do his tractor test. And now this is something I remember my brother doing about 40 years ago. I never bothered to do it. And so I duly lent him a tractor and took him to the test. And we walked around a housing estate with a very nice man for a driving examiner chap. From the Vehicle Standards Agency, and it was very good to see it in action, and good that they were so supportive and made it so easy to do. But yeah, it's a good thing to do. So he's covered now until he gets to be 17 and get his full license. So that's a bit of training, bit of added value going into the labour force.
Doing a bit to encourage the next generation, then, Hugh. No Louise this week, but we do have Abby with us, Abby Kay, Farmers Weekly Deputy Editor. Abby, what about you? What have you been up to?
So this week I have actually been working on a slight change of focus that I'm going to have in my career at Farmers Weekly. So I'm going to be taking a small step away from the kind of daily churn of the news cycle to spend more time focusing on longer form, in-depth pieces, investigations, campaigns, all that kind of stuff. So I've been speaking to multiple people across the industry to get a sense for what kind of things they want or they think need a deeper look. So if anybody listening has any thoughts about things that they would like me to look at, so things that perhaps aren't time sensitive, bigger issues, more complicated issues that'll take a little bit of work to get to the bottom of, please do get in touch with me. podcast@fwi.co.uk.
Yeah, podcast at fwi.co.uk. Or if you're in the UK itself, message us by texting the word farm, followed by a message to 88440. If there's anything you want Abby to take a special look at. Right now, though, let's take a look at this week's markets. Hugh.
Beef price still edging up, actually. 603.3. That's up nearly 3.3 pence on the week. So that's good news. The live weight, 347.9. That drops back a penny. Sheep price is actually firming on again. 3p on the dead weight. SQQ, 806.4. The live weight drops back about 8p, 377.2. Pig price edging up, dare I say. You got a penny on pigs this week, 179.7. Feed wheat. Now, we're seeing some firming coming into these arable markets because, not surprisingly, of a global situation. So you've got stuff going on in the Black Sea with the Russian-Ukraine conflict and grain ships being bombed there, which has suddenly put a spike into the market about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And you've also now got a realization in the North America specifically that where there are drought areas there, that the grain market, specifically actually the pressure, I think, initially coming on some of those maize forecasts is that they're expecting that crop to be somewhat restricted in part because of the weather. That said, just now Argentina are talking about a stronger than forecast wheat crop, but it's certainly putting some value back into the market. Feed wheat, 181.30. So that's gained, getting on for £8. And actually, a year ago, feed wheat was 162.9. So don't feel too poor, arable farmers, even though you are feeling super poor. It's better than it was last year. Not that it feels like it. Milling wheat, 206 dead. That's gained £11, or £10.5 actually, £10.50 on the week. So that's good. And again, a year ago, that was 192.3. So there's some value coming in. Barley, not so hot, £5 on, 148.80. Oilseed rape, 445.30. That's done over £20 on the spot in the week. Feed peas, 205.1, up from 197.5. Feed beans, 224 dead. That's gained £5 or £4.80 on the week. Diesel price, not surprisingly, because our friend in the White House has been dropping loads more bombs on Iran, not surprisingly, the diesel price has spiked up 98.95. So that's added 7p in the week.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, hot, dry weather and the prospect of a fourth summer heatwave have prompted Farm Safety Week reminders to watch out for field fires. A spate of fires has seen standing crops go up in smoke and farm machinery too, in some cases. NFU Combinable Crops Vice Chairman Andrew Williamson suffered a combine fire last year. He told us what happened.
I was coming away and all the air goes on the combine and the combine basically stopped. Super bit of smoke coming out the back of the combine, got out to investigate, and there was no sign of any actual fire where the smoke was. But then when I got back down off the combine, I could see that there was a small fire underneath on top of the axle, like above the brakes on the combine. So I grabbed the fire extinguisher and put that out, called 999, and the fire brigade came out within about 15 minutes. So it was really sorted it.
All in all then, Andrew, a very lucky escape.
Yeah, very lucky escape, really. We managed to control it, but obviously we know the combine fires, that once they go, they go. And I'd really make sure people stay safe in that situation. Don't do stupid things. Make sure, and so the comment would be, machines can be replaced, but people can't. So make sure you keep yourself safe. Don't take undue risks. Don't try and do things you shouldn't be doing. And if it's going to go on fire, it's going to go on fire. Call 999 and get the professionals out.
And you have changed the way that you do things, Andrew, on the back of this incident.
We've made a few adjustments. We now make sure we've got a cultivator close to hand if there is a fire. We've also got a makeshift water bowser with pumps on, so we've got more water at close hand for that situation. But yeah, we've just got to try and do everything we can to keep ourselves safe in these very dry, hot times.
A lucky escape then for Andrew Williamson, Deputy Chairman of the NFU Combinable Crops Board, Hugh, with a timely reminder on combine fires during Farm Safety Week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously so dry at the moment, isn't it? Everyone's a bit paranoid about combine fires, and it's a really tricky thing. I know because I've never had one personally. We've been to the combine for about 200 years, but when you speak to colleagues that have, it's one of those things. You've got people that scrupulously blow the combine down every day or twice a day, keep everything absolutely tip top, and it just takes one hydraulic hose to go and start spraying oil on an exhaust manifold, which is completely out of your control. Well, you could replace all the hoses every year, couldn't you? Like an aircraft, I suppose, but some might consider that overkill. But and off it goes. I know some people have fitted fire suppression systems, but they're not cheap. But yeah, combine fires are a real worry. I think fires in general, I was heartened to see, there was a thing on Facebook the other day, I can't remember where it was somewhere up in Yorkshire, it was an estate team, and it did have a bit of a look of Trumpton about it in terms of they're running out with a water bowser. They had a little vac tanker, a little old baby one from 20, 30 years ago, and some hoses, and they put them out. And they were spraying stuff about doing a bit of a fire drill. But I thought, actually, we should all have some sort of fire drill in our head, because other arid parts of the world do, don't they, where they get bushfires really commonly. We've got our IBCs here filled up, ready to go. God forbid something happens and we can get up there quickly and get some water on. That's probably the best we can do. But everyone needs to think about what they would do, what the plan is, should it happen to you.
And Abby, it is, of course, the Farm Safety Foundation's Farm Safety Week this week. The Yellow Wellies charity reminding us to stay safe on the farm. These farm fatality figures not really getting any better.
No, the focus this year for Yellow Wellies has also been accidents that don't result in fatalities, but, cause serious injury. And it's quite interesting because there was a new piece of research from the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health that's come out this week. And they're warning that lots of incidents never even make it into official reporting systems. So they surveyed 250 British farmers and found that nearly 1/3 avoided reporting incidents because they were concerned that if they did that, it would lead to more inspections, enforcement action, or legal consequences. And more than 1/3, that's 34%, said minor injuries and near misses just aren't serious enough to report. So there is that kind of culture of underreporting around accidents that don't result in a fatality that's kind of obscuring the true picture around farm safety. So, yeah, well done to Yellow Wellies for taking a kind of different tack on it this year.
Hugh, your thoughts?
Look, it's great that Yellow Wellies are doing this Farm Safety Week and it highlights it. And it's great that they're taking, as Abby's just said, a different tack, looking at long-term unreported underlying things and conditions that go on. And that probably comes as no surprise. But the reality is here, these numbers are not getting any better. In fact, they are getting worse. The death rate on farms as a proportion of the people working on farms, it's horrendous. There's less people working on farms now than there was 20, 30 years ago, and yet the death rate is higher. And if you look at it as a proportion of the population, I think it's less than 0.2% of the working population are on farms, and yet we account for something like 20, 25% of the workplace fatalities. No other sector would tolerate this. And yet we're having all these farm safety weeks and farm safety partnerships and all these getting togethers, drinking a lot of tea and talking a lot and wasting a lot of column spaces and printing things and pretty pictures, but nothing's improving. And it just reads a radical change of tack here if we're actually going to get on top of this and if we're actually going to stop people dying every time, or potentially dying every time they go out and work on the farm. So it's all well and good, but nothing is improving, and we should be doing a lot better than we are.
I think Hugh's absolutely right on that. And actually, one of the things that we've highlighted in our latest Level the Field campaign is that there are aspects around the safety conversation that are really relevant that we don't talk about. And one of those is physical health. So we know that older farmers are disproportionately represented in farm fatality statistics. And poor physical health is a contributor to people feeling unsafe on farm. 42% of people who had a physical health condition told us that they felt unsafe on farm because of it, but we never discuss that and we never talk about how to make that easier and how to allow people to have the confidence to give up certain aspects of their job, or to perhaps find an adaptation that makes them able to work more safely. And that is definitely something that we should be talking about more.
Yeah, talk about it, think about it, and make farming a safer place to be. If you want more information on farm safety, simply visit yellowwellies.org. There's lots of advice there. And if you want advice on physical health, the hidden farm safety risk, then simply search for Farmers Weekly, Level the Field, and you'll find everything you need there too. That is it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. Thank you for listening. We do hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. If you have, please do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've really enjoyed what you've heard, please do leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories affecting UK agriculture. But for now, until next week, I'm Johan Tasker.
I'm Abby Kay.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening. This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast was brought to you by KWS, seeding the future since 1856.